T and XP acknowledges the traditional owners of the land, the Turrbal and Yagara people, and we pay our respects to elders past and present.
Welcome to T and XP, a couple's cozy gaming podcast.
We're feeling cozy and we hope you are too.
My name's Alexander.
And I'm Erin.
T and XP is like a book club for cozy video games. And today, we're going to be looking at Enchanted, a game that puts an Australian twist on a classic chaotic restaurant game.
Just as we state that our podcast and where we live is on Turrbal and Yagara people's land in our acknowledgement of country each episode, it's important to point out that this episode's game was made on Wurundjeri country in Naarm, that's Melbourne. The Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung people are the traditional owners of most of the Yarra River Valley and therefore Melbourne area. We're going to talk more about why that's important throughout this episode. In this episode, we talk about the traditional owners of Australia. When we were growing up, we used the term Aboriginal or Indigenous, but in my job now at least, we use First Nations, so that's what I'm going to use in this episode. This doesn't make it the best term to use. The best term to use is the one that the, person you're talking to prefers. I know many First Nations people prefer their people to be spoken about as the name of their nation, the people of their land. When referring to all of Australia, which is made up of over 250 nations, more than 500 clans, and even more dialects, we're going to use First Nations today. If you're a person of Australia's First Nations and you think we get it wrong today, please let us know via our Instagram account. Onto the game. Enchanted was released in 2023 and developed by Dragon Bear Studios with the support of the Victorian Government, Creative Victoria, Film Victoria, and the Australian Centre for Moving Image, and a City of Melbourne COVID-19 Arts grant.
Before we get stuck into Enchanted itself, I want to talk about a couple of other games first, because part of what makes Enchanted interesting is how it puts a different and, yes, cozy spin on an existing idea.
Mm-hmm.
We did this back in Season 1 when we said that Eastshade was basically a cozy version of Skyrim. We love both games, so that's not meant to be reductive or dismissive, but the comparison was kind of obvious, especially if you looked at some of that iconography on the load screens, but anyway, that's going down a different rabbit hole. It's a similar deal with Enchanted, because there are some clear similarities with a very successful game franchise that preceded it. Erin, I'm sure you know which game I'm talking about, so apologies for the flashbacks it's going to induce.
Overcooked, the Heart Racer, the Pulse Quickener, the IKEA/camping test for couples of the video game world.
Well, you see, we were fine with IKEA, but Overcooked itself was a different level of stress.
And let's just not go camping.
For background, Overcooked is a restaurant management game, where up to 4 players need to staff a series of deliberately unhinged kitchens. Every one of Overcooked's kitchen levels is designed to be deliberately frustrating and comically hazardous. Your kitchen will be spread out over a lake of lava, or on a pirate ship where the counters roll around with the waves, and you're then subjected to an onslaught of complex, multi-step recipes, with strict timing requirements, and the occasional kitchen fire or angry buzzer noise if you mess up. The Overcooked games were rightly cemented as gaming classics, and don't get me wrong, they are brilliant. But they are also one of the most stressful experiences of your life.
Yeah, don't play before bed without a really good wind-down buffer, in my personal experience.
This is part of what makes Enchanted an interesting thing to talk about, though. I think it's a great game in its own right, but part of the reason why we wanted to do an episode on it is because it draws inspiration from Overcooked, but then takes it in a very different direction. It uses a similar formula, and it can still be really challenging at times, but unlike Overcooked, you won't be left hyperventilating and sobbing after every level, so that's nice.
Or, like us, making restaurant calls in the kitchen and saying things like "behind" when we're making dinner, which was weird part of our lives.
It's coming back into vogue now that we're watching The Bear, so
that's
yeah.
True.
There's one other game I want to talk about, and then we're going to get to Enchanted.
Mm-hmm.
This other game is Pixel Cafe. Now, this is a cafe management game where you play as Pixel, and you need to manically staff a cafe kiosk all on your own. On a very, very broad level, it's got a lot of similar strokes. Orders will come flooding in with stringent timing requirements, and you'll need to multitask and triage constantly to manage it all. This is weird because it sounds super stressful, but a lot of people cite Pixel Cafe as one of their favourite cozy games. And, Overcooked aside, there are a lot of these cafe or restaurant games in the cozy genre.
I don't like it. Too fast-paced.
Bringing all of this back to Enchanted, I think what I'm trying to say is that some games can be really cozy even when it looks or sounds super stressful. When you really start to dig into why, I think it's because they're really more about hitting like a bit of a rhythm and establishing a satisfying flow, rather than seeing how far your poor fraying nerves can be pushed under pressure. There's this kind of meditative quality, even when they're challenging. That's sort of the deal with Enchanted. It looks and plays like Overcooked, which again is easily one of the most stressful games we've ever played, but it feels more like Pixel Cafe, where pressure and flow is actually kind of cathartic when you're playing it.
I guess so, and we've reviewed Dave the Diver before, which has a restaurant element in it as well, and again, there was some nice flow in that. But yeah, Enchanted really focuses all in on the restaurant experience.
Yeah, I think one other thing which sets Enchanted aside is it does actually have a bit of an overarching storyline, which Overcooked did not.
True, yeah.
On that note, do you want to talk us through the story?
I do. In Enchanted, you'll play as a quartet of adventurers led by Yarul, the game's main protagonist. You've just returned to Yarul's home only to discover her family's inn has been taken over by an evil wizard in their absence. The wizard, known simply as Colin, is too powerful to fight, but you manage to bait him into a dare where he challenges you for ownership of the inn. If you can prove that you are better inn managers than him, then Colin will, allegedly, relinquish his illegitimate claim to the land.
The story is fairly light on, and mostly exists to tie the levels together, but you'll still get a few scenes where the heroes learn more about Yarl's homeland. It's all delivered with a good bit of humour, including a running joke where Colin's takeover of the inn as an analogy for colonialism becomes increasingly obvious. The side characters will also help introduce the player to some of Australia's themes of land, fauna, and First Nations culture. Don't expect a deep dive into these topics, though. It's designed to be an approachable, all-ages primer, and takes a pretty light touch.
Yeah. Enchanted's gameplay revolves around teaming up with some friends, or AI bots if you have no friends on hand, to help run the inn each morning and each afternoon. You'll guide your respective characters around the often maze-like interior of the inn, hurrying between workstations in order to fulfill customer orders. There's a time limit for the overall level, and some characters will also have individual timers for their orders, so you'll need to work out how to operate as efficiently as possible.
Alternatively, you can skip efficiency and compensate with unnecessary risk, such as throwing ingredients across the room rather than simply handing them over. Evan loves this.
I do. I'm just like, let's just throw things in a kitchen and a restaurant. It's good.
It's fine. If the steak misses, just pick it up off the floor and you're still good to go.
Exactly. Yes. Anywho, initially, speaking of steaks, you will just be cooking steaks and brewing single ingredient potions, which involves simply carrying the raw ingredient to the correct workstation, such as a grill or a cauldron, waiting a bit, and then serving it to the customer. Your range of tasks will quickly expand as you progress through the game, though. Before long, you'll be fighting off thieves, placating monsters, guiding elders to their VIP seats, tending to giant wombat steeds, and enchanting weapons with more complex potions. The potions aren't just for the customers either. You'll sometimes need to consume them yourself to communicate with elementals, clear paths, and so on.
So your list of tasks will generally be getting broader rather than deeper. There'll be lots to do, but most of the individual tasks won't exceed more than 2 or 3 steps. Say, brewing a 2-ingredient strength potion, and then wrangling a wombat. In other words, you tend to juggle lots of little tasks at once, and you're usually spared the overcooked experience of comparatively complex supply chains.
Yes. I just like your example, just make a potion and wrangle a wombat. Just wrangle a wombat. And you're like, oh my god, they're like tiny little tanks.
Look, Dinkum had giant wombats. Enchanted has giant wombats. I love them all.
Yes. These ones are a bit smaller. These ones seem a bit more true to size, I suppose. So.
But they still have someone riding on them.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot about that, yeah.
Yeah, so you know those long, broad speed bumps?
Yes.
They are called wombat speed bumps.
Really?
Yeah, and the idea is because it slows you down to the speed of a wombat.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's kind of cute.
It is.
Okay. What do they call those ones that a metal screwed onto the ground and make your teeth rattle every time you do it? They're like crocodile speed bumps.
I don't know if those ones have a name. I shall look into it and get back to you.
Yeah. How did you find out about wombat speed bumps?
They have like a road safety ad campaign they're running on Reddit, and it's localized, and so yeah, you can see they're called wombat ones. It's got like a little
cute.
wombat in the rearview mirror, so it's like it's driving the car.
Oh,
Yeah.
Thank you, Reddit.
I thought you'd like that one.
I do. Back to game mechanics. The inn doesn't stay the same between levels, and most layouts will have some curveball that will require cooperation to overcome. Sometimes the inn will be split in two, with raw ingredients on one half and cooking and brewing stations on the other. Later on, you'll have to contend with floor plans that rearrange themselves mid-level or one-way teleporters to navigate. Between days, you'll decide how to spend both your hard-earned shells, that's the game's currency, and your character's precious free time. There are a few downtime activities to choose from, such as cleaning, accounting, exploring, and each one will present a little dilemma. Depending on your choice, it'll grant a little bonus or penalty for the next morning.
I liked the shop and the downtime activities because it really helped create a sense of, continuity between the levels. You feel like there's this sense of progression rather than just grinding through each stage. It also brings the pace back down a little after each potentially frantic finish in the previous in-game day, so, that also helps the coziness.
Yeah, it does. And it's really nice to have the characters. There's often like an elder in their house at night and stuff, and they can talk to the elder and they give them a tip, or it helps just progress the game or tie the story together for the next day. It's pretty.
Why don't we talk about accessibility?
Sounds good. Enchanted has a couple of accessibility features. You can keep recipe cards on screen to help lower remembering recipes, and you can turn the timing of the game into easy mode, which lowers the chaotic feeling of the game. The game is best played on a controller, and you will have to work against a clock. If you want to achieve a 3 out of 3 star rating on every level, you'll need to have timing and reflexes to handle the game. You also need to be able to prioritize. Do you get a steak first or grab a potion? Do you chase off that cat or magpie from the food and money, or do you refill the potions barrel? If you don't mind going slower and messing up some dinner orders, this is a game that a lot of people could play. So, characters.
Yeah, so the key character is going to be Yarrell, and to a lesser extent her friends. They're all keen but respectful fighters and magic users. They're good examples of respectful Jarjums.
That's children in Bunjalung, a nation in northeastern New South Wales, and a broadly used term for children in several First Nations languages.
Yeah, I hope you're learning something.
Yeah.
These young'uns are Jarjums, no more, but demonstrate the listening and manners required of them. You don't get a huge change in character growth from Yarrell and her friends. You're not really supposed to in, a restaurant management game.
Yeah.
But you do still get a few cutscenes of them, and you get to see them learning about the people and spirits they're serving. And they always listen and respond in earnest.
Yeah.
There are also several elders in the game, both as guides and as restaurant patrons. Elders are the leaders who deserve a little extra respect due to the wisdom and experience they hold. In the game, this is shown through seating elders first and listening to them in the evenings between restaurant shifts. Finally, the other main character is the wizard, Colin, or as he's later referred to in-game, Mr. Iser. Get it? Colonizer? Colonizer?
Oh, okay. I guess Ian Vader was already taken.
Yeah.
The wizard Colin represents the stealing of land that occurred by the British, but, and I think this is really clever, Colin changes the goalposts. He sets a challenge to Yarrell to get ownership of the restaurant back, and then when they're doing well, he changes the rules of the game by introducing new animals or conditions. It's a great piece of commentary.
And just to be clear, do you mean you find Colin changing the goalposts to be clever, or the game developers making this commentary to be clever?
Yeah, the second one.
just checking. Look, I'm sure Colin has his fans, but I'd rather not be married to one of them. So, yeah.
Valid, yes. Yeah.
Why don't you take us into artwork?
Yeah, so stylistically, the artwork and rendering look a bit like Animal Crossing, but there's more earth tones and brighter colours in Enchanted. You'll see some art and symbols that are reminiscent of various First Nations traditional art, but the developers have clearly carefully worked with artists and elders to ensure the artwork isn't overstepping or imitating. There's actually a big issue in the Australian First Nations art community about authenticity of artwork, ensuring the artist is a First Nations person, and making sure that the artist is properly paid and recognised for their work. Enchanted does a good job at making sure there's no mistakes, that the game is First Nations focused, but doesn't use, to my reckoning anyway, symbols that would be problematic for non-mob to use.
And just for any international listeners, what is a mob?
Mob is the people you're from as well, like if you're a First Nations person. So, like we're non-mob, and mob is a term for a person that's First Nations.
On a similar note, the music is bright and fun. It speeds up towards the end of levels, and it uses the widely recognizable didgeridoo sound. That's the low, resonant droning, which I think is actually called a lot of different things in different languages. I heard that it's now thought that didgeridoo is a Western name to the instrument, which was given later on. But, fact check that for yourself, because I heard the same thing about kangaroo, and I think that's now gone all the way around to now become a factoid.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So obvious themes in Enchanted are those relating to the First Nations connections the game has, colonization and invasion. One of the things I mentioned before is the developers' consultancy of elders and First Nations people. First Nations people and issues have been represented in a few different ways over the years in media that suggest consultancy is really needed. For example, in early Australian film, after they stopped showing First Nations people as straight-out evil, the quote-unquote noble savage stereotype was common. This is when First Nations people were represented as inherently good, but lesser than white people. It could also include the assumption that being a First Nations person is tragic or destined to fail in the face of white progress. A film that addresses this and at least centres Aboriginal experience is Jeddah from the 1950s. But as late as 1967, a famous white actor in blackface and a Sri Lankan actor starred as First Nations characters in Journey Out of Darkness.
Okay, so I think I only know of one famous Sri Lankan Australian actor.
Yeah.
Are you talking about Kamal, beloved Australian personality, singer, actor, and national treasure?
I am talking about Kamal, beloved Australian personality, singer, actor, and national treasure. We could definitely do an episode about the pressure on diverse background celebrities to accept any and all roles and also allow themselves to be the butt of jokes in order to be accepted by the wider Australian community. But that is a topic for a different podcast. One worth investigating, I think so as well. Getting back to representation in the media, there have been lots of sympathetic films and books written about First Nations people, but there are two key areas that receive criticism. Firstly, that the representation is sympathetic but portrays First Nations people as broken or disempowered. And secondly, that these texts don't consult First Nations people. We have a lot of First Nations filmmakers and authors now, and I'd recommend Brand New Day for a comedy and The Sapphires for an uplifting watch with First Nations filmmakers and stories. And I also recommend these because they're probably two of the easier ones to find on streaming services. There are heaps of amazing ones out there, but they are an accessible and findable in if you're interested.
So I'm sure our listeners have probably guessed this just by, the division of who's talking when. I am not an expert on this.
Me neither. No.
But, based on the stuff you said, I think the developers of Enchanted did a good job of consulting with First Nations people in trying to create a respectful, joyful representation of the powerful First Nations culture and characters.
Yeah.
Yao is clearly the leader of a group of friends and adventurers, but they have a great relationship where they can play to each other's strengths, listen to each other and the elders, and learn enough to defeat Colin.
Absolutely. Other games, if you're interested in restaurant management sims that you could look at, would be something like Lemon Cake and Dragon Song Tavern. Did you end up playing any of Lemon Cake, or was that just me?
That was just you. So
okay.
I played a bit of Dragon Song Tavern. I think Lemon Cake was an Erin exclusive.
Okay, yes. So Lemon Cake is a much gentler restaurant management experience. There's still a timer on it, but it's a lot slower. It really doesn't matter if you get a lot of sales or not in a day and things like that as well. There's a couple of slightly faster mini games in there where, at the end of the day you have to catch bugs in your restaurant and things like that. But it's a lot gentler. The aesthetic is very cozy and very gentle as well. Lots of pastels and gentle colours and things like that as well. And so if you're just sort of interested or intrigued in the restaurant management sim, that is a very soft, nice one to go into if you don't want anything too stressful.
By comparison, Dragon Song Tavern, just another cozy title, that's a much more kind of more meta experience that, you'll do the farming, you'll collect ingredients, you'll go to town, you'll do a bit of adventuring on the side. Fighting, yep. And the restaurant management and waiting tables is just how you kind of round it out towards the end of the day. You'll start by putting together a menu and you'll decide what all your courses and drinks are going to be, and then you just have a bit of service towards the end.
Yeah.
It's quite nicely done, but it's not a huge focus of the game, and again, it's much gentler.
And again, if you are interested in dipping your toe in a restaurant management sim, that can be one that is countered by lots of other activities.
Yeah. There's one other title, and that's just if you want Cozy and Australiana. We've reviewed it before, but Dinkum is a great title.
Oh, yeah, for the Australiana part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This comes with the big asterisk, though, that it doesn't really go into that much First Nation stuff.
No.
That I think one of the first NPC you come across is sort of kind of lightly First Nations coded, but even then they deliberately leave it ambiguous.
Yeah, true. So, tell me about the cozy rating for Enchanted. What did you think?
Okay, I would give Enchanted a 2 out of 5 on the cozy scale.
Okay.
But,
Okay, yeah.
I want to stress that's not a bad thing. This is just where we place it in the genre. Like I mentioned before, there's a lot of widely recognized restaurant, tavern, and cafe management games, all in the cozy genre, so that's not the issue. But Enchanted maybe leans a little more towards the arcade-style action, rather than hitting like this, soothing, meditative groove. That said, the evening downtime parts are a lovely little interlude, and the overall tone is really upbeat and cute. Even when you're contending with constant timers, you can still appreciate the adorable little characters and little thirsty monsters coming into your tavern.
Yeah.
I also just love seeing Australia depicted in gaming, so that's a plus. Enchanted shows the well that it's not just all about scary spiders and snakes. Though, admittedly, it does have all those crocodiles that Bob Catter was trying to warn us about.
But I ain't spending any time on it. It's a really niche Australian politics reference, if anyone wants to look that up.
You do want to look it up, yes.
Yeah. And having said all that, this isn't a depressing game. It could be played purely as a restaurant sim, or as a game that invites discussion about invasion of already occupied lands. And the game rating, what do you think you would give it overall?
I gave it a 3 out of 5. Enchanted is a great game, and we wouldn't be reviewing it if we thought otherwise. That said, it's always going to be a bit in the shadow of Overcooked, which is just this masterstroke of creativity and ingenuity in level design. Admittedly, Enchanted has the advantage that you don't need therapy afterwards, but the mechanics of running the inn are just a little bit more vanilla by comparison. It still does its own thing though, and I really enjoyed customizing your characters and upgrading the inn between levels. I think Enchanted's biggest appeal is the inclusion of a lot of First Nation themes. The gameplay itself is charming and fun, but maybe a little straightforward.
Okay. Yeah, again, no half ratings. I'd be tempted to give it a 3.5 out of 5, but I see your points as well, and so I would agree on that 3 out of 5. And I think if we then think about where that would be on the S, A, B, C, D, etc. scale, I would be tempted to think maybe a C?
I'm going to say a C if you have Overcooked, and a B if you don't have Overcooked and haven't played it before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That will be really fun to put together when I get to a social media post, revising that. Thank you for that, my love.
You're welcome. Flip a coin on the day.
Okay, yeah. I will. So that's a nice little tie-in for our fans. Go to our Instagram page in approximately 3 weeks' time and find out where that one landed.
Well, I'm going to do the sign-off anyway. You can't stop me.
True.
That's all we have for today. Thank you for listening to Tea and XP, a couple's cozy gaming podcast. We'd like to encourage you to follow our Instagram account, as mentioned, which you can find at Tea and XP Podcast. And if you like listening to us, then rating, reviewing, and following are really helpful in ensuring like-minded cozy people find us. Join us next time for romance and adventure in Haven, where being cut off from the rest of humanity has never sounded cozier. Until then, stay cozy.
Like a good yarn with your elders.